Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for a Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butch-Chester. You know what I like to do on the show. I want to enlighten you, inspire you, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today, we want to get you fired up about music. Now, you guys have heard me talk about my love of music, and especially country music. So I am going to tickle your fancy with a new artist that you may not know about, but someone that you can definitely add to your playlist. She's never been on the show before, so we are definitely going to give her some time today. Her name is Ashley Puckett, and I am excited to talk to her today. Good morning, Ashley. Thank you so much for being on.
Good morning, Dr. Angela. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's great to be on the show here.
I love it. Now, you are a new artist to my audience, so I can't wait to have you tell us a little bit about yourself and the current project that you're working on. You're not necessarily new to the music business, but you're new to us. So if you would, please, can you tell us a little bit about Ashley? What makes you you?
Yes. Well, I have been singing basically my entire life. So I remember singing my first song probably around age 5. And I still remember the song, and I still perform it today, actually, as a cover song. It was You Are Mine from the Dixie Chicks.
Aww.
And so beautiful song. Since then, it stuck with me along with some others I picked up. As I grew up, I would do different things like talent shows in high school, which then transformed into church festivals and all kind of different public outings. And music was just something that was always present in my life. As I got a little bit older, I started to write songs. And from those types of moments, I never really had to search for something that I was passionate about. It just found me, I like to say. So throughout all that, growing up, right out of high school,
right,
I was in a band, so that was a lot of fun too. And, I dabbled into a couple other things here and there, but music always stuck with me. And it wasn't until, at this point, it was probably about 2 years now, that I had met my producer, Brian Cole, and my sound engineer, Doug Casper. And at that point, it's kind of when everything in my life kind of tied together, and that's kind of what brought me to this point.
It's so awesome how we kind of have those moments in our lives where you just know that everything it's so smooth, the transition. There's no bumps in the road. There's no closed doors. Everything just happens the way that it's supposed to happen. And it's like, yep, God moment. Definitely, this is the relationship that's supposed to happen at this moment of now. So I love that. I love that. Now, as far as deciding on the title of your new project, if I understand correctly, it's Never Say Never. How did you come up with such a title?
Yes. Well, Never Say Never is actually a song title for one of my favorite tracks on the album. And when we were going through different songs, that was actually one of my favorite parts, was choosing what songs were going to be important enough in my life and beautiful enough to be on my debut album. And I wanted it to reflect the journey, too, because the title of an album is supposed to mean something. And when I was around, thinking about what kind of title I wanted to express to my audience and my fans, I was actually weighing 2 options. I was weighing a song and title called Magic of the Moment, because to me, I thought the entire thing, from the chance of meeting Brian and Doug and then having this opportunity, was kind of random at the perfect time, and it was really just a magical process. But why I chose Never Say Never is because through all that magic and really finding myself in that spot at the most perfect time, I had this feeling when we had our first meeting, all of us together, that I know this is it. I know I have to take this chance. It's now or never. So when the song title came across to me through an email, Never Say Never, and I listened to about a minute and a half of it, I fell in love with the song. the beauty of it. It's a love song. I love romance. And at that point, I knew Never Say Never was going to be the title.
And what an inspirational 3 words there. Never say never. You can't stop. You have to keep going, especially when you're in pursuit of your dream. So what a beautiful reminder to everyone else, too, when they hear the song of, wow, the story behind it all, and that you decided to just keep going. I love that. Now, when it comes to naming a song, sometimes people, it seems like you name the song the most common phrase that's a part of the lyric. But then there are some songs who you have no idea where the title came from. What is the process for you in naming your songs?
So that is right, and I love artists that are able to do that, and songwriters, because it makes you think, and a lot of those hidden messages. So I really love that about songwriters. But my process, I do tend to stick with maybe a phrase in the song that I use over and over again. For me, typically something in the chorus. But I have written songs to where it's maybe just one line in a song that I'll use as the title, because to me that might have been the entire reason for writing the song. So there's kind of that's part of the art, I guess I should say. There is no right or wrong, so that's what makes it unique.
And it's really funny because even if there are some really popular songs out there that, even if their title doesn't match up to what we think the title is, everyone still knows the song that you're talking about. So there's still a beautiful way that you're able to connect it. And it's like, that's not the title, but you know what I'm talking about, so play along. So absolutely, I love that. Now, as far as being in studio, we hear all of these stories about how an artist has to spend these super long hours, and it just becomes your life. You just eat, breathe, sleep, studio time. Is there truth to that? Is that just a part of the process?
It absolutely is true. So my timing was a little bit different. There's a lot of artists that will just spend a few days straight, weeks, months in the studio back to back. My situation was unique. I was doing about 2 days a week, sometimes 3, and then we went down to 1 day a week to finish out the vocal track. So we kind of split it up a little bit of time, but even doing anywhere between 1 to 3 days a week, 8-hour sessions, took us about a year to complete the project.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot involved.
So it's not as easy or as quick of a process that people think, and it's like, hey, when are you going to crank out another song, and think that you're just going to go in studio, sing into the mic, and boom, there's a brand new record to put out. There is a process. Thank you so much, Chief, for explaining that to people. Now, as far as being on the road and doing all the touring things that comes along with being an artist, be it that you are doing with everything that's going on, you're only doing kind of some local stuff, or be it that you're trying to venture out within the parameters of the limitations that we have right now. Are you looking forward to being able to get out there and hit the road and have that experience? Or do you think that you're more of a studio person where you kind of like that more in-house, intimate setting?
So right now, with everything going on, I am so very much looking forward to getting out and picking up kind of where everything left off. I have a really cool show that got postponed, so I was excited about that. It was I was going to be opening for Mark Chestnut. So something like that, I've been a fan of his for a very long time, and it was just a really cool experience that I couldn't wait for. So I am looking forward to that, but I can tell you I really enjoyed the studio time. Just the creativity, the fun, even though you are spending, like I said, 8 hours a day there and multiple times a week, it really does become part of your life that you kind of look forward to. It's not really work. It's just something that you guys are all kind of collaborating, trying different things. And to me, I kind of like being in the box there, trying different things, not being worried about messing something up. I know for me personally, and I'm sure there's other artists out there that my memory is just not what it used to be anymore. And I always worry about lyrics and messing up my own lyrics. And it sounds funny, but, sometimes in the midst of things, when you're interacting with crowds, you kind of, my mind just drifts. It likes to take in all kind of things.
Absolutely.
And, so that is a pro about being there in the studio. But, I like them both almost equally, I think.
And, thank you for having that honest moment, because there have been times when I've been at a concert and, I'm singing along and I'm having such a great time. And then at the end, I go, oh, my goodness, how do they remember, all of the words to the song? Now, I remembered the words to the songs. I kind of fumbled through, and the parts I didn't know, of course, I could just la, 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 through. But it's like, you're the artist, and it's like, wow, just to be able to retain all of that and to be able to not only sing it, but perform it for your audience and really bring us in and take us on that journey with you. So thanks for that honest moment. Listen, I get tongue-tied all the time. So, and I know there's some listeners going, yep, she just fumbled a few seconds ago. But, it's like a part of it, and it's like we're human, and it happens from time to time. But oddly enough, I think that it makes our audience, our listeners, our fans kind of just love us a little bit more, because it's like that was a real moment. We were there, you're not a robot, you're not canned, and it's live. And that's what happens sometimes when it's live. So I absolutely love it. Now, before I let you go, I want to make sure that everyone knows everything that they need to know about you. So Ashley, could you remind everyone the title of your project, where can we pick up a copy, and if they want to stay in contact with you, how do they do that?
So the album, again, is Never Say Never. It is available on my website at ashleypuckett.com, along with some other cool merchandise. You can also download it digitally on all of the platforms. It's over on it's on YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, however you listen to it. You can find it there. Add me to your Spotify playlist. And if you like the songs, the current one out right now that everyone's raving about is Bulletproof. So I hope everyone takes a listen to that. And, of course, True to My Heart, the Never Say Never track, if you could listen to that and add that to your list as well. You can always keep up on Facebook as well. I must say that I'm a little bit addicted to Facebook, so any new exciting music news is on my music page if you just search Ashley Puckett or Ashley Puckett Music.
I love it. Well, Ashley Puckett, thank you so much for spending time with us here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. Continued successes and continuing traveling mercies whenever you're able to get back on the road. God bless you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. You know what I like to do on the show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about your mental health. There are so many people out there suffering from various degrees of PTSD. If a trauma has happened in your life or in the life of someone that you love or know in general, and you want to be able to help them be their best, then today's show is exactly what you needed. My guest today is William John Roberts, and we're going to talk about his book, Trauma in the Family, How to Live with a Sufferer of PTSD. Now, you know what I'm about to tell you. Go on, get your coffee, get your tea, get comfy, get cozy, because we are about to get started. Good morning, William. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Good morning, Angela.
I want to definitely talk about your book today. As a fellow therapist, I definitely know that this is a very hot topic, and considering everything that's going on in the world, we definitely need to address it more. But before we do, I want to ask you the question that I ask of all of my authors that are on, and that is, what makes William John Roberts William John Roberts?
Right. Well, first of all, I have to say I'm actually a sufferer P.T.S.D myself, and so I wrote a book that I needed to educate my family and my friends about what happened to me and the impact it had on me, so they would understand me better. And the idea was to preserve the relationships, because most people who are traumatized have a great deal of problem with relationships. And that's really the purpose of the book, why I did it.
So, let's see. It says that you are an ex-serviceman in the Royal Air Force. Tell us a little bit about that. Is being in the Air Force something that you always wanted to do?
Well, I joined at 15 years old in 1957. And 6 years later, I had this traumatic event which changed my life forever.
Now, you have studied and qualified as a CBT. You are a counselor and later an accredited trauma therapist. Someone may not be familiar with the accredited trauma therapist. Is it as easy or as self-explanatory as we should assume? What's a trauma therapist?
Well, it's someone who's actually studied trauma, especially if they've already experienced it, which means it gives you a good grounding in what happens. And the other thing is, I'm a member of the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies in America. Although I haven't retired.
Now, is mental health something that a field that you always wanted to be involved in? Is that something that you've had a liking to or an inclination to as a younger person? When did you decide to do the mental health aspect of your life?
Well, being an ex-serviceman, I saw in my fellows that I served with and other people I've met, ex-forces, a lot of these people have enormous problems with their relationships, especially if they've been a PTSD sufferer. So what the idea was to try and educate the partners so they could understand the people better and preserve the relationships.
Now, becoming an author, you explained that was something that you felt that you needed to do because you wanted to help your family understand what was going on in your life. We know the why, so let me ask you this. After your book was published, it's in your hand and you're sharing it with those family members. Do you find that they were enlightened, that they had no idea what was going on with you, or did you find that it simply helped them fill in the spaces, the gaps that were there?
Well, it did both, I suppose, in a way, because they would understand where I come from to start with. But also what was interesting is to preserve their relationships, because what they don't realize, when you live with someone with PTSD, invariably you will be infected by their problems and you will become traumatized without even realizing. It's called secondary traumatization. And the whole idea was educate the family members so they could deal with the range of problems that can present, especially with children, that they may not be aware of what's happening around them.
Now, we understand that you were writing the book to assist your family, your loved ones, and those that were in your space, that were a part of your support team. However, for the broader audience, who is this book geared towards? Should the person suffering from PTSD read it? Should the person who is the support member or the caregiver read it? Or is it for anyone who's simply curious and wants to know how they can help?
It could be for anybody because it explains the mechanics of it, how it works. But also, primarily, it was designed for the support work which the family would provide, which is so important to help the principal client recover.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the time, if they don't feel they're supported, they will sometimes get worse. So it pays to have somebody supporting them from within the family by understanding what is going on.
Now, can you give us some examples of the types of cases that have been explained in your book? How do you give us some data, some hands-on examples?
I'm just trying to think. I haven't met that many. The thing is, as well, you have to realize people get affected by events in their childhood that sometimes can come back and give them problems in their adulthood. And I have a particular memory of something in particular where a lady who was bullied as a child, and when she went to a new job, and when she was in this job, the person who was their immediate superior began to bully her exactly the way it was done to when she was a child, in a way. So it reoccurred, the problem, it came back up, and it almost destroyed the lady's relationship with her husband.
You know, I don't think that many people realize that PTSD is not just for retired military, for police officers. It's absolutely anyone. It's you know, if you grew up in a rough neighborhood, if you were in a horrific accident, if you've had any traumatic thing happen to you, it's not just for one group of people, but it could be from anyone. Now, someone may be saying, well, if you experience it as a child, but many times you act out as an adult, are there any particular symptoms that we need to look for? Is there anything that will help us to understand that, hey, this adult isn't acting up simply because, you know, they're having a bad day, but because they're suffering from PTSD? Are there any particular symptoms we should look for?
That is true. There could be. A common one, when I worked in the youth offending team, dealing with young people who commit criminal acts, one of the things we used to notice was if they'd suffered traumatic incidents in their lives, what would happen is they'd sit in the back to the wall where they could see a window and a door and ready to escape at a moment's notice. And you could watch them literally, their eyes were going around the room all the time, scanning it for possible threats. And you could detect it. Same as ex-soldiers who used to be in Ireland when they were walking on the street. They had to keep looking at the windows to make sure no one was going to shoot at them. So they automatically walked, eyeing the first floor windows all the time, looking for any curtain that twitched. And they do it without even thinking about it. So it affects you in ways you wouldn't necessarily think it would. Also, the other thing that's important, people seem to forget, is there's a thing called the silent anniversary. When the event comes around, the time of the year, if you haven't dealt with the original problem, it will give you a problem in the form of a flu-like effect or feeling of colour, feeling unwell, and there's no possible explanation for it. And John Cleese refers it to in his famous book, How to Survive Families, because he had the problem, and he actually explains it. But that is quite common. People tend to forget because PTSD is incurable. You're stuck with it for life. So you have to learn to cope. And everyone is different because it's not the event that causes the problem. It's what you perceive of the event. It's how you think of it. So what we have to do is try and change the way you think of it in future.
All right. Well, it is almost time for us to go to break. But before we do, if you can, William, can you remind everyone what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Its title is Trauma in the Family, and a copy can be obtained from Author House or through Amazon. or you can get it direct from me. I'm on Facebook. People can look me up. I do a free website, which I give free help to anyone who asks.
Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
We're home during COVID-19, but we're not alone. New Life Pastoral Counseling can help. For affordable Christian counseling, visit newlifepastoralcounseling.com or call 562-209-2083 today.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up? Even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butts-Chester. My guest today is William John Roberts, and we are talking about his book, Trauma in the Family. If you are someone, you love someone, or you know someone suffering from PTSD, then today is a day that you would want to tune in and listen as he shares about his story and writing a book all about it. So, William, my next question for you is, what are your plans for the future? Are there any new books that you have in the works?
Yes, there is. There's actually two eventually I will do. I'm doing one on PTSD and domestic violence because they are closely allied to each other, and also PTSD and how children cope with it. Traumatized children.
So what other therapies can someone use besides CBT?
Well, there's many coping strategies, and one of which you can use is EFT, emotional freedom technique. You can use existentialism. It depends on how the person's belief system is changed. Sometimes you may need to help them reconsider their beliefs and change it very slightly so they can cope better. Because all we're trying to do is teach people to cope. I can't cure it, I don't profess to cure it, but I will help people to cope better.
And speaking of coping better, what were some things that you did to cope better?
Well, for me, I paint. That's my best relaxation for me. I'm a painter. That's it. Other people I know write poetry. Other people I know do different other things. Some people do gardening and enables them to cope. It's whatever works. You've got to experiment and try different methods. Some are better than others, and some work better than others. It's just finding what works for you. You're an individual. You're unique. Whatever works for someone isn't going to necessarily work for you, but what works for someone else.
Now, you say that you suffer from complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Some people are only familiar with PTSD. Can you tell us more about CPTSD?
Right. That means there are complex reasons why you have the problem. The problem isn't a simple source. It can be a number of sources that meld into one. And that's why it's called complex or chronic PTSD, because it is not a simple source. You've got maybe 2 or 3 different sources that will merge into one eventually. Mine was from a road accident. I had an accident in Aden in 1966 in which a little boy was killed. It was not my fault, but I had a long time dealing with it because I was presented with a situation where I was hunted because I had a price on my head, because the person who the accident happened with, his father was the head of the terrorist organization we were fighting at the time. And it gave me a big problem. Every time I went out, I didn't know if I was going to come back in.
Now, how can living with CPTSD sufferers affect the children, and how can we help our little ones when it's children as opposed to adults?
Well, the big problem with the children is you've got to see what effect it has, because we do sort of bizarre behaviours sometimes. Because of my accident involved a child, I used to be hyper vigilant in any of my children got in any form of threat whatsoever. And my children didn't understand why I reacted the way I reacted, which was different to what other people would react. So that was part of the problem. And I had to enable them to understand it wasn't directly against them, it was my problem that I was trying to deal with, but although it concerned them.
So when you have children of your own and you're suffering from, be it PTSD or CPTSD, how do you keep from traumatizing your own children?
This was the difficulty. It was very difficult not to, because the biggest explanation was to reassure them that you did love them and you did care about them, and the reaction why you were reacting at the time wasn't the normal reaction you would expect. Because I used to panic and shout and stuff, but that was, when my children understood that, we now get on great. But when they were a lot younger, it was much more difficult.
Do the children of PTSD sufferers or CPTSD sufferers end up suffering from anxiety themselves?
Yes. A lot of the time that can happen. But you have to be aware of it. And then
what should we look for?
Which reassure them.
And what should we look for children who are suffering from anxiety?
Well, you just watch their behavior. They will normally indicate by the way they behave. Like I said, it depends where they sit in a room. If they're really traumatized, they won't sit in the middle of a room, for instance. They'll always sit with a back to a wall where they can see the entrance and see the exit, and any possible threat they can flee, because it's fight or flight. That's one of the aspects of PTSD. And if it's really bad, a lot of people, you can hide it. You can cover it up with something else. By behavior, you can cover it up by the way you behave sometimes.
What are the symptoms of the children who are suffering from anxiety, who are the children of a parent or a loved one who has PTSD? What are those symptoms?
Well, they can be hypervigilant. They can be extremely anxious all the time, very nervous as well. Can tend to hide themselves away sometimes. They can't deal with something, they run away from it. So you look for their behavior, observe their behavior, and see if you can find out why they're behaving that way.
Do you think that school counselors are equipped or knowledgeable enough to deal with the anxiety that is caused with the children who may be a child of someone suffering from CPTSD?
That's why it's important the whole family should be seen as a support group to be helped and assisted, because it's the whole family that help the principal sufferer recover as well. So if they've got the right type of support, both for the child and for the adults in the group, it will work much better. Whereas a disorganized family, it's chaos.
For a
people use drugs or alcohol.
For a family that perhaps does not have the resources, they are a low-income family, or they could be a barely above the poverty line working family. They don't have the ability to see a therapist or a counselor or anything like that. What could they do to make sure that they are dealing with the situation in their home?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is to educate them so they could be aware. And education is power at the end of the day. If you educate people so they understand better, they will deal with it better. And there's plenty of free help around. If you look, you just got to know what you're looking for.
Any suggestions on that? If you don't know what you're looking for, how do you know what to look for? Many websites, and there's many free assistants going around that you can locate online. There's plenty of it. Information at the end of the day is what you need. The more information you have and the more educated you are on the subject, the better you will understand it and be able to cope with it. So are you saying that because we're talking about low-income families, they may not have the internet, would they be able to go to a free clinic? Would they be able to talk to someone in a setting like that and still be able to get mental health assistance?
They would be able to get help by going to the library and looking it up. There's plenty of information on the bookshelf if you know where to look. So the more they can educate themselves, the better. And there's many societies that offer free help and assistance. You just got to be able to go look for them. I mean, I give free help from my website. I give free help to anyone who asks.
Many times here in the States, we understand that part of the problem with people that are low income, barely above the poverty line, is that they just don't have internet access. Libraries are not in their neighborhoods, and it becomes an issue with so many things that are going on in the world, and especially dealing with, for example, with the COVID-19, with the students trying to even go to school. Many don't have internet access. So it's a problem, and I think it's something that we take for granted. We that are much better off, that have these things, and it becomes just second nature for us to even pick up our phones, grab it, and Google something. For someone who doesn't have the means, sometimes it's quite difficult for them to be able to get the assistance that they need properly. Now, speaking of examples, are there any particular examples of childhood events that carry into adulthood that we can definitively know this person is more than likely suffering from PTSD or even from CPTSD? It's a tell or it's a sign.
Well, the criteria is actually only 6, which is what on the DSM-5, that is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Society. That is volume 5. That's the 5th edition. That's the basic criteria is only 6. And in fact, I run myself a questionnaire free in which you can write free diagnostic reports on the questionnaires. You can identify the problem areas that people have and come up with suggestions to help them find a way of solving a solution.
I love it. Well, I am so glad that we had you on today and you were able to not only share about your book, but you were able to give us some suggestions about ways that we can help those who are suffering, or those who especially don't have the means, who may be crying out for help and we didn't realize that was what they were doing. Before we go, William, if you could please, can you remind everyone again, what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how can one stay in contact with you?
Right. I'm on Facebook, so anyone can Facebook me in England anytime. I've got an email address if anyone wants it, if that's all right. Which
sure.
is john.roberts.ftcuk@gmail.com. And I'll try and help and assist any way I can. And
thank you again for being...
By Author House and sold on Amazon.
Thank you again for being on the show today.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
And listeners, thank you for tuning in as well. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.